Welcome to Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth. On today's show, I've got Mark Anthony Taylor. We're going to be looking at Project Firestorm, courtesy of Mossad. Here we go. Welcome, Mark. Over to you.
Hi, Caroline. As you say, we're discussing Mossad's Project Firestorm. I don't know whether they've given an official name, but this is our name for their new weapon of mass destruction. I've got a little riddle for you, Caroline. Can you read it out and guess the answer?
Okay, I am a drone, yet I have no wings nor rotors. I cannot see your face, but I know you are there. There are millions of my kind, yet for the most part, you can't see us. You tell us everything, and we tell you nothing. We carry no weapons, yet we can destroy you. One click of a button, and your country is toast. Yet if you choose me, you can't live without me. What am I?
And the answer is a smart meter.
Oh, wow, you got me there. I didn't think... With that picture, I didn't realize it was the answer was smart meters.
Yep.
Now this is the item that's supposed to be on our basket for purchase, and yet I believe with the government's targets we are behind the government's targets. But not a day goes by without an advert encouraging you to have a smart meter.
Okay, let's just Google here.
When was the first smart meter actually installed, do we know, in the UK?
1974, the patent was awarded. 1977, they were first developed before the internet. So I suppose it depends on your definition of smart, which has changed radically over the last few decades. But let's have a look at how Google lists smart meters. If I put an image search. So
well, should we actually explain to our audience what smart actually stands for?
Well, someone who doesn't know what a smart meter is, who innocently typed smart meter into Google, would think smart meter means some kind of coloured LED gizmo, which gives, at any point in time, it gives your power consumption and how much that consumption is costing you per hour and what your current bill is. So government promotes this smart meter as just like another gizmo, like a mobile phone, for having it in your house.
But isn't smart actually standing for something like militarized technology?
I don't believe so. I think it's just a sales gimmick to make you think that you're being smart and clever and you've got the latest gizmo in your house. So as you can see, the top six, well, 7, 8, the top 8 Google search results all give you these nice little units that they are telling you are the smart meters, but these are not the smart meters. Let's have a look at the Israeli firm PowerCom that is selling smart meters to governments, and PowerCom in its own brochures does not use these images.
So is PowerCom the main supplier, and they were the ones that received the US patents?
PowerCom is making these smart meters obviously for the Israeli home market, but I believe they're also venturing into Korea and, yes, Korea, I think South Korea and Africa. It could be that they sell chips or meters abroad to Europe, I don't know, but it's the same kind of technology behind all of these things, the same kind of people. Let's have a look at the electricity meters. Here's one. This is something that you might be fitted with. This is for sale. This is a brochure that isn't meant for the home consumer. It's meant for government and electricity companies to see why they should order thousands or millions of these things. Remotely configurable, it says, which means that someone other than an electrician can basically change the state of these things.
Anywhere in the world?
We'll see about that, yeah. They support hot swappable communications modules. One of these, PLC, RF, LAN, or GRPS. PLC means power line communications, which is generally where all of these things are going. That is using your electricity line, not just to transmit electricity, but encoded signals. You have RF, which is radio frequency. So these things have almost what I can see general purpose radio communications built in. LAN, which means they can be wired to an internet. And interestingly, GRPS, which is the 2 and 3G wireless communication standard that we used to have on the older smartphones. Now, they also support something called open protocols that interface with third-party meters or sensor manufacturers. So these things can basically, people can download over the internet the specification for these things and then write software for them. So you can imagine the microchips in these things aren't trivial. They're actually little computers that can run very sophisticated software. This one also supports multi-current thresholds, which means that if you're in debt, for example, to an electricity company, they can reduce the current that you're allowed to drain off, so that, for example, you've only got enough power to use maybe a laptop and a telephone, but not be allowed enough power to heat your home. So you have enough power to settle your debt, but not actually to stay warm in the winter, if they so choose.
And look at the multi-tariffs. It says 4 tariffs and 8 customer billing cycles. 4 tariffs, are we talking about the poorer people in society possibly being on a higher tariff at their choosing?
I think the problem is with all of this global warming nonsense, governments around the world haven't been building enough power stations. That means that they have to somehow, and they can either build more stations, but that takes 20 years or so to get some of these things online. And you're not just building the station, but you have to figure out the supply of fuel to that station. So obviously you've got to potentially build fuel pipelines and expand your refineries. So you have all these immigrants coming in, for example, from the third world. Our population expands, but our infrastructure hasn't expanded with that population. Only housing has been built and not the power and the water systems for all these people. So they need to limit the power consumption in order to keep the 240 volts on the mains. If there's too much power consumption, then that drops down, and a lot of electric goods, electronics, will fail if the input voltage is even a little less than 240 volts. So these things have been built around the world to compensate for governments' laxity and mass migration policies. Merkel, for example, when she brings in millions of Africans, she hasn't increased the infrastructure at the same rate that she's bringing them in. So she can edict 3 million are allowed into Europe at the snap of her fingers, but of course you can't build the power systems at the snap of her fingers. So this is their kind of solution. So they can tell people that they're not allowed electricity to warm themselves, or not allowed air conditioning in the summer to cool themselves. But the serious issue with this, as I will go into this, is not that governments can control our power usage, but governments can use this to assassinate anyone it deems a threat, and it can assassinate people en masse. It can actually be used to destroy an entire country, all of the individuals at the same time.
Well, I know in California, when they had the fires last summer, the houses with the smart meters were worse affected than those without.
If you look, let's have a look at what the government says about the safety of these smart meters. What happens if you hack them?
This is our government, is it?
This is, well, not sure. Can smart meters be hacked? They ask. Let's have a look.
It mentions there UK smart meters subject to cyber hacking.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so what the Guardian reports is that hackers can cause fraud, explosions, and house fires. Now, as we said, these smart meters have little computers in them. The computers can be controlled via this GPRS, which is the mobile phone connection, or the PLC, which is basically a private internet run by the electricity companies, the power line communications. And since this software allows remote access to your electricity supply, a hacker could create a bit of software, for example, that causes the main central processing unit of these small computers inside the smart meters to go into a loop. That would cause the smart meter either to fail or to get overheated and then to burn out and then be destroyed, leaving you without power. Some of those smart meters might actually undergo catastrophic failure if they were in a loop for too long. They might overheat and then set fire. But what the hacker could also do is tell the relays on that smart meter to switch off and on at, say, 1 million times a second, which would be the speed of the central processing units, 1 million or 1 billion times a second. So if you've got a 240 volt power supply with 50 kilowatts going into your house, and it is being switched on and off by the relays at 1 billion times a second, then there will be a continuous spark across those relays. Those relays could overheat, melt, and then you've got 50 kilowatts of electricity going through molten metal in the middle of your kitchen. Every device that, other than a very simple heating element, exposed to relays toggling power on and off very quickly, can itself fail. So, for example, if you switch your television on and off as fast as you can, within a few minutes you'll quite possibly break it. So this can be used to selectively destroy expensive electronic hardware and potentially cause fires in some hardware, particularly with high power consumption. So this is a very serious risk, and what we saw in the California fires is that there were reports that people with smart meters were much more likely to be victims of the fire than those without. And some of the some of those in the with the smart meter were in rural communities, and they might have particular voting patterns that are different from those in urban areas in California. And it is known that there are people who absolutely hate and loathe and detest other people with contrary voting patterns. You can see on the internet, many people will wish dead someone who votes the opposite way. So if one of these people works for an electricity company, and they work for a software company involved with these meters, there's every possibility that they could get hold of either a vulnerability for all meters or a user's username and password for the control of their own home system. And such an evil person with that security data has the means to start a fire in the house. And as we discussed, not only can you start fires, but you can arrange an assassination to look like an accident. For example, someone with a mobile phone or laptop communicating with your smart meter and a pair of binoculars watches you through your kitchen window at night. They see you pour a hot kettle of water, and the moment that you pour it, they press a button and your lights go off, which gives you the very real possibility of burning your hand. And if you drop the kettle, you end up burning your legs. And if you're really unlucky, you can get a complication in hospital and you don't leave that hospital alive. And everyone will report that as a dreadful accident. An attacker could, for example, make the lights fail at random occasions a week or so prior to the event, so it looks like it's just another failure in the lighting system.
Wow. So basically, anybody who's politically active, who goes against the government narrative, is in line to be targeted for sure.
Yeah, and the amount of software in these things, with them having these open standards that any third-party device can liaise with by radio frequency, means there's got to be a lot of technically minded people with the knowledge to guess where the vulnerabilities in the software will lie. So we called it Mossad's Project Firestorm, which is a bit of an exaggeration, but it's not that much of an exaggeration. The intelligence services would definitely find a use in this system, spying on people, spying on their, not just the electrical usage, but what devices they've got at home. We're currently under what we call Smart Meter 1.0, which is where the government is telling everyone to get the smart meters in. Once all these smart meters in place, the next thing I think the government will do is tell any electrical goods manufacturers that they need to put one of these radio frequency smart chips in every electrical device, everything from a phone charger to a cooker. And that will mean that when you switch stuff on, your smart meter will not just know that the power has increased, but it'll know the product and the model number and even the serial number of the device that you switch on. So for example, with your kettle, some remote agent would get a notice to tell you that your kettle is boiling. At the very moment that the power switches off that kettle, they get a second notice. If they were hostile to you, they could basically count to 5 after the power goes off and then switch your lights off. They could literally do that with thousands of customers all at the same time. And that would mean you'd have thousands of burns victims or hundreds of burns victims all hitting hospitals the same day. Now the government, if it finds out that these smart meters have been used in an assassination or an injury, they're not likely to want to admit that the smart meter was the way that this was done. Otherwise, that would basically create panic, hysteria, well-reasoned panic amongst people with smart meters. So government would likely want that covered up, even if it's not responsible directly. But the real imminent danger I see from these smart meters is that we already have about half the households have them. And if a hostile power, such as some madman from Extinction Rebellion, full of government propaganda, full of hate, if he wanted to, he could publish a firmware update for these smart meters along with a bit of software, so at a particular time on a particular day, everyone on the list would suffer an explosion or fire. And if he was really mad, he could do it literally to every smart meter holder. Now, obviously, some of these attempts would fail because sometimes the smart meter will just blow a fuse or blow a circuit breaker. But even if, say, only 1 in 1,000 houses were to burn down when this event took place, with having, say, 5 million households having these things, that's 5,000 house fires on the same day.
That would put a real pressure on the emergency services as well.
That's right. And it would leave 5 million households without power until all of these meters could be replaced. And it's taken years to put these meters in. So we could have an entire nation without power for literally years. So this could easily be a system for mass execution of an entire nation or an entire ethnic group within a nation. And the government is mandating that we put all these things in place. So this swarm-based AI, where we've been expecting flying robots or Terminator droids with face recognition that will shoot down the enemies, they don't actually need that system because they've put the weapon right in the middle of our households. And it's fully armed, and it has the 50 kilowatt power supply as the weapon system. It turns out that these radio frequencies that these meters use, the GPRS, which is the mobile phone network, their transmission circuit is not limited by battery life because they're drawing on a 50 kilowatt power supply, which means typically their radio signals will be far more powerful than the average mobile phone. And there are some reports that the safe distance for the transmitters in these devices is something like 40 feet in comparison with about 2 feet for a mobile phone. So if you've, say, got one located in the kitchen as we have, and you spend an hour in that kitchen, that's the equivalent of having a phone next to your head for an hour.
Right.
So this...
And you should never have that because it takes only 10 minutes a week, apparently, before you can develop a tumour.
Yeah, so as serious as 5G is, this thing is already prepped to wipe us all out. Even if an attack was carried out now, they could still create thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of house fires, just doing what I said, which is toggle the relays at a million times a second. They could cause hundreds of thousands of house fires, and they would certainly leave a blackout that would take years amongst 5 million or so households. So this weapon is enabled and it's live now. And all it takes is for someone to get at the private security key for the firmware in these meters. So whoever's got that key, whoever can access it, has the power to destroy nations.
And obviously, it doesn't. You as an individual living in that house, you don't actually have to have a mobile phone for this destruction of your property.
No, the electricity company has basically enabled the entire electric grid as a private internet, and then your GPRS unit inside these boxes is connecting to the main internet, so that anyone with any internet access can send commands to shut down and re-enable the power of any device on a smart meter. So, you can be in the middle of Timbuktu with a laptop and shut down the power of any individual wherever there's a smart grid. And they've got smart grids in Africa, Korea, Europe, the USA. So it's frightening power that they've given the keepers of these firmware private keys. Frightening power, and there seems to be absolutely no oversight. No one's willing to say we need the safety systems built in first. It's built. I mean, they build these systems. They put them into houses, and they've already burst into flames and exploded and burnt houses down. And that's not even when they were not even activated by a hostile agent. They've done so because they were faulty to begin with.
Wow. I'm sure The Simpsons has covered this in a program sometime.
Yeah, it's quite possible.
They have to tell us what they're going to do to us.
Well, if they do that to us, they can put us into the dark age. Remember when Iran was trying to refine its nuclear fuels, and at a press of a button, Israel caused its gas centrifuges to overload and destruct themselves. So presumably they had some kind of smart grid linking the power supply to these gas centrifuges, and they just pressed a button and pumped in more current than these centrifuges could handle, and they just got so fast that they exploded.
And of course, if you think about EU regulations, there are so many regulations about what you can burn these days. So if you wanted to keep your house warm, once your electricity supply and your gas supply have been stopped, what do? What can you burn? They could put a regulation in tomorrow to prevent you from using any type of wood, coal, etc. So what would you do then?
Well, it's about 5 times more efficient to heat your own home with organic fuel than it is to use electricity. The reason being is that fossil fuels are used to power stations, and then that power is turned into electricity, and then there are inefficiencies turning that heat into electricity. So by the time you turn that electricity into heat in your own home, most of the heat that was ever produced in that power station has gone up the chimney. Whereas if you burn the fuels in your own house, say with coal, all of the waste heat is actually ending up in your own house. So it's far more efficient to heat your house with fuel than it is with the electricity.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is telling a certain class of people that they're not allowed to stay warm in the winter.
Yeah, it'll be like the social credit system in China.
So you can that's a way of kind of making people homeless in their own homes, isn't it? You've got a house, but it's no longer a home because it doesn't do the basics of a home. That's keep you warm. And once you take the heat away from a house, then you get molds growing. A house that is too moldy soon becomes unfit for inhabitation. So they can literally, by cutting off your ability to heat yourself destroy the function of your house and make you homeless.
And your possessions rot as well. So, yes. And if you've got young children, there'll be the ailments.
Yeah, when I grew up in my house, we had a damp problem. It wasn't due to lack of heating, it was due to the brickwork that we fixed later in the later years. But I grew up with there's fungus on my lungs, and I had childhood bronchitis on two occasions, and that ate approximately a third of my lung.
Oh my gosh! Just for the standard of the house you were living in at the time.
So if people can hear me cough regularly or hear struggles with my breathing, it's because of that childhood bronchitis. So they could, even in this 21st century of high-tech build construction, people can still suffer that kind of stuff if they can't afford to heat the house.
And of course, now we're going back into the Victorian times where people are having to make choices between eating and heating.
Yes, it's fairly disgusting, isn't it?
It is. So on that note, how shall we, can we leave this show on a bright note for people at home? Surely we have to come together, and this is essentially or potentially a situation that can impact on you regardless of your background, your financial wealth, your education.
Obviously, if you're being told you must have a meter, you must refuse as much as you can. If you already have a meter and the power company is telling you you've got to pay to have it removed, threaten to change suppliers, and if they invoice you, do a study on that meter and any links to a house fire or security issue, and then you can counterclaim in any court that their meter was a security risk. They'd have had to replace it anyway. So always refuse whatever people tell you you owe if you don't feel that you should owe anything. And when we've been lied into taking these smart meters, we've been lied about the risks. So why should people have to pay money when they've been duped?
Well, I know that people who live in housing association properties have them forced upon them. And I guess that's all to do with social housing, the councils, the UN Agenda 21, 2030. So it's smart cities.
If it's an absolute problem and you're forced to have a meter, the next best thing you can do is take some metal sheeting or layers of aluminium foil, and you wrap this around the box and around the other wall, the outer side of the wall that it's on. So what this does is shield you from the radiation, and it helps prevent radio frequencies from getting into the box and controlling the software. So you shield the box from external radio waves with metal foil. But of course, since it's electrics, you don't really want to be doing that within the electrical enclosure. So you make sure you put the foil without touching any of the 240 volt power supply. That's what you should do. You should shield yourself from the radiation. I mean, all of this stuff breaks the regulator codes for maximum permissible radiation from devices. Even your iPhones and your Android phones break those regulations.
Right, so the government has been encouraging us to have this meter technology in our houses without due diligence.
Well, the due diligence would not be to not allow remote control of the power supply. The only way you can secure yourself is to not allow either internet or radio frequency control of the toggling of any power supply, and not allow any communications between a device and the meter. Do you think GCHQ has smart meters pumping radiation around that communicates with third-party objects?
I very much doubt it. That would be rather silly, wouldn't it?
GCHQ bothers with smart meters, and if they don't, because they realise they could never secure it, then why should the rest of us?
Absolutely. If it's not good enough for them, it's not good enough for us. Well, thank you.
GCHQ have said that these are a danger. I don't know if you read that report. Experts say even GCHQ is concerned about smart meters. This is one of the reasons they've been delaying these, is because the old meters had security issues. GCHQ looked into them. Even though they could capitalize on them themselves, they knew that their own workers and their own families would be at risk with these meters. So they tried to stop government rolling out the smart grid, but the government kept doing it. So I think the government is being told what to do by some oligarchs who tell them it's necessary to control the people. But
well, when you see outside Parliament today and you see the numbers of people that are taking to the streets, you can see that they're envisaging trouble ahead because of what they're doing to us and what we're allowing them to do to us.
Yeah, and what the government likes to do is find out the leaders of such movements, literally kill those leaders off, and then put puppet leaders who will turn the mob on itself, destroy the mob with infighting, and target the energies in all the wrong ways. So this is an assassination system and a genocide system all rolled into one. But it's been sold to government as a spying system. But the real danger is the genocide system.
Well, it's a shame that Extinction Rebellion can't cover this topic, isn't it, really?
They, as I say, they'd be the kind of people who'd use it, wouldn't they? If they could target dairy farmers, for example, switch the machines off at key times, or kill the dairy.
Because they want everybody to go vegan now, don't they?
That's right, yeah. I mean, there are animal rights activists who would literally kill farmers if they could. And if they can get away with it and do it remotely, very tempting for them. But I believe no one should have this power.
No one should.
No.
All right, Mark, thank you so much for that. That's been great. You've shown me a different perspective to these smart meters. I knew they were bad for your health, and I knew that the government could turn them off, your energy supply off at random, at their own will. But this has provided me with a more sinister perspective on what could happen. And judging from the fact that people voted to leave the European Union over 3 years ago, and we know that the government are not going to side with the will of the people, then they have a problem, haven't they? That we are much more of a divided country than we ever have been. So what are they going to do to us next? Could this be their answer?
It may well be. They can do it right now at the push of a button.
Thank you, Mark. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody at home for watching and listening. As usual, Mark always gives us an interesting perspective. Being an applied, is it a theoretical physicist, Mark? That's your qualification?
Theoretical physics, yeah.
Thank you, and thanks for everybody at home. Take yourself, take your security very, very seriously now. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye for now.
And
Thanks, Mark.
Click like. Thank you.